You're good. I can hear you now.
Greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks to over 100 of you for joining this webinar, Resource Development for Churches, through this remarkable medium of virtual communication to which we are, it seems, daily growing more and more accustomed due to the COVID virus. I'm Rob Townes, and I serve the Diocese of Atlanta on its Commission on Ministry and as a member of the Episcopal Community Foundation for Middle and North Georgia. And I'm a communicant of St. Bede's Episcopal Church, where my wife, Lindsay Bueller, serves as an assisting priest and is the director of the Julian of Norwich Center that offers spiritual direction. We met and married in seminary, and our friends who know us best often say of us that together we play a mean game of church, and I'm happy to be so partnered with her. I am also a principal of the fundraising consulting firm Sinclair Townsend Company, and since 1980 we have consulted across the philanthropic space. But because of my school background, we do a lot of work with churches and church-related organizations. I'm thrilled to be co-leading this presentation with Lauren Sigmund, Director of Resource Development at Christ Episcopal Church in Greenville, South Carolina. I've had the pleasure of working with Lauren, and I've been so impressed with her development, professionalism, and her love and dedication to her family and her church. I'm grateful to her for agreeing to co-lead this webinar on resource development, and thankful for all the time she has given to its content and its creative elements. We wish to thank Joe Swimmer and Kim Grass of the SEEP Network for inviting Lauren and me to make this presentation and supporting us in bringing this offering to you. I'll begin by covering the role of resource development that will help to frame in a holistic way the work that we do. And Lauren will conclude our remarks by sharing her frontline experience as a resource development officer. We hope to be able to answer the questions you have and can submit via the chat box, but for simplicity's sake, we ask that you allow us to address your questions at the end of this presentation. But before we begin, please allow me to offer a word of prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious God, giver of all good gifts, we thank you for this day and for the opportunities it presents, and for the gift of your church, and for all the ways through the power of your Holy Spirit that we are allowed to participate in the continuance of its work. We ask you strengthen and direct us in all our doings, such that we will be faithful stewards of your bounty for the furtherance of your beloved of love and justice here on earth. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
And Lauren will be bringing up the PowerPoint. And to begin, we're going to look at the numbers. This is Giving USA, the 2020 numbers. This actually captured the numbers of the calendar year 2019. But in 2019, about 450 billion with a B given away in the United States. In this way, we're the most generous country on the face of the planet. 450 billion, that's larger than some countries' entire GDP. And this is money that we're giving away. If you look at the source, this is the good news. If you look at the source of the contributions, you see that individuals and bequests who are dead individuals give about 80% of the money. Bequests come in at 10%. That's don't overlook the dead people, because we get a lot of money from bequests. And the good news is that most of the money, thankfully, goes to religion. So we're sitting pretty right now. We are well within the religious sector, and we have individuals who are people in the pews. So we have the most lucrative source of money sitting in the pews. That's the good news, but Lauren will show us the next slide. This is the not so good news. If you see, this giving of religion has declined by 15% in the last 25 years. That's a precipitous decline of giving to religion. And I asked Marvin Gaye's question, what's going on? It seems to me what's going on is that we don't live in the 50s anymore. We live in a much more secular world than we did decades ago. That's one thing. And the other thing, it seems to me, and I see this because we do consult across the philanthropic spectrum. To my dismay, we in the religious sector are underinvesting in the area of fundraising. And we are not professionalizing our development function, like, say, independent schools, colleges, and university development programs are, and in the healthcare sector, where the foundations are really muscling up their fundraising capabilities. And speaking of underinvesting in resource development, if you were to look at the sector of, say, education, independent schools, colleges, universities, they will spend about 15 to 20 cents to raise a dollar. Healthcare will spend about 20 to 25 cents to raise a dollar. Now, for a healthcare CEO who's making maybe a thin margin on the system side with all the operations and whatnot, the fact that the foundation says, okay, CEO, if you give us 25 cents, we'll give you back a dollar, that's a 400% return, and the CEO will take that all day long, take that investment in resource development. And I've done a lot over the years, a lot of the back of the napkin analysis of how much churches spend on fundraising resource development. Churches spend about 1 to 2 cents to raise a dollar. And I remember drawing the graph for diminishing returns in my economics class. But we have in the church sector a long way to go. We have much more investment, and we'll get much more return long before we see anything close to a diminishing return. So my soapbox is that we need to not underinvest anymore. We need to invest in resource development, okay? So remember in Candler School of Theology, we were given a test on what are the central activities of the church. And we learned 5 of them. And the first was through word and prayer and praise, we hear the word of God proclaimed in song and sermon and are fed spiritual food through the body and blood of Christ. Worship was a central activity of the church. The next was education. We learn of God's loving activity in the world through scripture, reason, experience, and tradition. You see, I graduated from a Methodist seminary with 4 legs, not 3, on the stool there. And then we offer pastoral care as the third activity of the church, loving our neighbors as ourselves. We offer each other as agents of healing and wholeness to those who are hurting within our community and beyond. And then the next area, central area, outreach, striving for justice and peace. We serve all those in need, especially the poor, offering assistance in the name of Christ. And then to sum it all up, a word which we don't use too much in the Episcopal Church, evangelism. The word we proclaim is one of invitation to those who wish to find their home in God and the like. in their life and community. Okay. But in all of my years of church service and church work, there seemed to be something that we do that is not named, a central activity that was not recognized or claimed. And I wish to offer this as another central activity of the church, and that is resource development. What do I mean by that? Building the body of Christ by developing the church's God-given resources. Through it, we grow and develop a more intimate relationship with God by sharing the gifts we've received from the great gift giver. And to me, this resource development, even though we don't claim it or name it, is as central to our church's ministry as worship, education, pastoral care, evangelism, and outreach. Now, let me make a sidebar comment here. There's a difference between central activities of the church and functions of the church. And why do I think it's appropriate to include resource development as a central activity and not say accounting. Now, accounting is a function within a church, but it's not a central activity. And I don't really claim accounting as a central activity because central activities help us develop a more intimate relationship with God. Worship, education, outreach, evangelism, all these help us develop a more intimate relationship with God. And accounting doesn't do that for me. I may be doing accounting wrong, but accounting doesn't, deepen my relationship with God like resource development God, where we live and grow and develop a more intimate relationship with God. So there is within a resource development a three-legged stool. If we go to the next, and the three legs of the stool are for resource development, by definition, strategic planning, communications, and fundraising. For strategic planning, we discern who we are in God, our mission, where we're going with God, our vision, and how we're going to partner with God through goals and strategies to incarnate that vision, to give body to that vision. Second leg of the stool is communication, which is an act of revelation, where we share with God's people God's word for us as regards who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And then third leg of the stool is fundraising, defined as the identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship of God's people to build the body of Christ. And because visuals are important to me, I want to share with you in this next screen a perfect visual, I think, for resource development. And I remember first seeing this symbol at the New York World's Fair in 1964, and it was a symbol of atomic power. And you see there the electrons circling around the nucleus, and it was a pregnant image for power. And I think within this image, we can see that there are three different activities within resource development. There's the strategic planning orbit, the communications orbit, the fundraising orbit, and together, united in a holistic fashion, that represents to me a power that we need to plug into for the growth of the church. So that visual has stayed with me through the years. Now, we ignore, on the next slide, we ignore resource development at our own peril. And let me go back. The first thing is important is to look at your church's attitude toward fundraising. Is it a necessary evil or a ministry that's integral to the work of the church? I think that that's an important question for us to address. Is fundraising something we do often begrudgingly, undertaken every fall, or is it something that is life-giving and is an invitation for people to go deeper in their intimate relationship with God, as is worship and the other central functions. It's important to remember that church fundraising campaigns are stewardship efforts whose goal is both to better equip the church for ministry. We give to a need through a strong and clear case for support, and we help people to grow in their relationship with God. We need to give for our own spiritual development. We are made in the image of the God, the image of the gift giver, the one who gave us life, the one who gave us the means of salvation. We are made in that image, and when we are gift givers, we become more fully human because we become godlike, and we are wired to give. It's in our DNA, and we need to move in that direction and flourish in that direction of gift giving, because we are made to give. So we give to a need, and we need to give. It's not one or the other. It is a both and. And resource development, as you see on the next screen, is foundational. I would say it's kind of a giving pyramid in its own way. Ignoring resource development is a dangerous oversight, because it not only deepens our relationship with God, but it also supports other central activities of the church. And if you look at independent schools that are tuition driven, healthcare, very much driven by patient billings, resource development supplements their budgets. But for a church, resource development is kind of the beginning and the end of our funding stream. And so we overlook resource development and overlook developing that muscle to our peril, because here's the thing: no money, no mission, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. And so we see that fund resource development is a foundational understanding for all of our work in the church. I can remember showing you the next screen in my economics class. We had the demand and supply axes, and these were cross-current dynamics, and the point of intersection was profit maximization. And I've thought through these years of fundraising that there is a similar cross-current dynamic that occurs in fundraising, where fundraising is both donor-driven, and that axis is pretty much plotted by things like external surveys, like donor feasibility studies. That helps plot this. And then we have things like strategic planning that helps us plot that institutionally driven axis. And you see that point of intersection, and this is all metaphorically speaking, that's our philanthropic maximization. And we have to be, as fundraisers, attuned to the institutionally driven axis and component of fundraising, and the donor-driven component of fundraising. So on the next slide, I want to delve into this institutionally driven axis. Are we working from a strategic plan? And I think that for us fundraisers, this is a key question. Are our fundraising efforts strategically aligned to the strategic priorities of the church? And it is critical that the church, through its plan, give us kind of something to sell, to orient ourselves to via programmatically and the like. On the next page is a pretty much symbol of our strategic planning diagram used, and we're moving from bottom left to upper right. Our mission is who we are, our reason for being. Our vision is where we're going, how we wish to define ourselves in the future. And we move from mission to vision by setting short-term 1-year goals, intermediate term 2 to 5 year goals, and long-term 5-year goals. And as you see, annual giving is a strategy that we use for accomplishing our short-term goals, year in, year out budget raising. And capital giving is a strategy that we use to accomplish our intermediate term goals, things like capital campaigns for a building program. Takes about 5 years to raise and collect the money. Takes about 5 years to build the building. So that would fall within the intermediate term goal. And then we have legacy giving, that is our strategy to help us accomplish our long-term goal. And legacy giving find themselves mostly in endowments. And what do endowments do? They help us institutionalize programs. And I want to say that there is, and on the next page, you'll see another graph that I've devised where annual giving is foundational, and upon its success, we have and build a foundation for capital and major giving. And upon that, we build successful legacy giving programs. And as I've often said, an annual giving helps an organization to go. It drives the budget. Capital or major giving helps the organization to grow. It helps the organization shift a gear in its growth trajectory. And legacy giving helps an organization to stay or to carry the alliteration forward. It grounds the organization. Now, plan giving is involved, or tax-wise ways of giving, that's plan giving, is involved in each of these levels. You can have plan gifts that help you meet annual goals, capital goals, and legacy goals. But if we carry on with our understanding of mission, in the next, what is our mission statement? Now, a lot of us have worked on mission statements. And on the next slide, we see that through the wisdom of the Episcopal Church, we have put our mission statement on page 855 in the Book of Common Prayer. To me, it's like hiding a light under a bushel, but on 855, we have the mission of the Episcopal Church. The mission of the church is to restore all people to unity with God and each other in Christ. That's who we are, and that's what we do. And as a parish, now from a diocesan perspective, we are missionary outposts of the diocese. But a lot of us on the parish work with parishes tend to be a bit more specific about who we are and our work. It isn't as global as the Episcopal Church is to restore all people to unity with God. It's a little bit more particular, a little bit more in line with the particular charisms of your faith community. So we spend a lot of time on defining who we are, and that's all to the good. If we go to the next slide, it's important for us to articulate a vision of where we're going. Without a vision, the people perish. And this is where it takes more time really to develop a vision for the direction of your parish. This is kind of where politics and various interest groups kind of may get tangled up. But it's important to articulate who we are in God, our mission, and where we're going with God. And what is our vision statement? What is our North Star? Where do we sense God calling us to do in the next 5 or 10 years? And on the next slide, I want to give you some helpful hints as a fundraiser for putting together this strategic plan and this particular vision statement, because this vision statement kind of gives us our marching orders and helps us define our goals and objectives again, because they incarnate after a number of years, our vision. And what I would warn you against in developing a vision statement is that your vision of your parish is to bring in the kingdom. please steer away from that type of vision statement, because that's more than a $1 million or $5 million budget can afford. Bringing in the kingdom, takes a lot more money than just that. So please offer a vision, set a vision that is measurable and confirmable, and so that you will know when you're there in, say, 5 to 10 years. And so that's just some lessons learned over time. And I feel like if you have a parish mission specific statement, and if you have a parish vision specific statement, you will really be enabled in your fundraising, because that's pretty much sets your marching orders for your short, intermediate, and long term. And here's the thing, my purpose is in emphasizing the importance of resource development is not to change the seminary books to add 5 central activities of a church. I don't think that my emphasizing resource development's importance is going to move the needle on the central activities of the church. But I do want through this to emphasize the importance of the work that we do to funding the ministry of the church and growing people in their intimate relationship with God. And I think the more we give, the more God-like we become, and we grow in our faith. So that's kind of a sense of the role of resource development. And I hope this helps you frame a more holistic understanding of how fundraising is related to the other legs of the stool, strategic planning and communications. And now Lauren is going to move into some of her frontline experience as being a resource development officer in a local church. Lauren.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate all of your wisdom on resource development. I've learned a lot from Rob over the past few years that we've worked together. I want to just give, before I jump into creating and implementing a resource development ministry at your church, I just want to give you a little bit of background about who I am and the church that I work for. So I have been in development at Christ Church for 4 years now. And prior to that, I worked at United Way. And prior to that, I worked at the YMCA. So I've been in development work for about almost 12 years now. But again, just doing church development work for 4 years now. I've been a member of our parish for 10 years. And just to give you a little bit of background on our parish, we have about a little over 1,700 households at our church, and about 820 giving units. And last year we raised about 2.6 million, and we have an endowment that hovers at about 14 or 15 million. So just want to give you a little bit of background about that. So I want to share what has worked for us at Christ Church in Greenville as far as implementing a resource development ministry. So I have a few key things that I think are important. The first one is to hire a staff person to lead this effort. I think, based on what Rob shared with us, it's really important to realize that this is a ministry just like faith development is, just like pastoral care and worship. So it's worthy of investing in. And I truly believe if you hire the right person for the role, you will see a return on your investment. And again, hospitals, universities, they are spending a lot more on their development staff and their development teams, and we're competing for the same dollars. So, the nonprofit sector is growing, and that means our competition is growing. So We need giving to religion is shrinking, as you could see in the first few slides that Rob shared. And we need to reverse that. And I think the key is to be sure to hire a professional to lead that effort. Second, I would say, work really closely with your rector on resource development. Your rector is the CEO and the face of your parish. While we as stewardship professionals can influence the parish to give generously, it's really the rector who's going to effectively mobilize and inspire that broad base of support. The parishioners want to follow the lead of the rector. So I think it's really important that that you work closely with him. We need to be preaching and teaching about stewardship year round. And so I really rely on our rector and our clergy folks to teach and preach about this in Bible studies, Sunday school classes, and in church on Sunday. I would also say that you need to work closely with your rector in regards to knowing who your donors are and making sure that your rector knows who your donors are, especially your major donors. Tracking, changes in giving, whether it's an increase in giving or decrease in giving, that's the kind of information that is really important to share with your rector. If someone made, a significant gift, then you want to share that with your rector so that he or she can call that person and personally thank them. Same with a decreased gift or pledge. That's oftentimes, that could be a pastoral concern. And so we want to be sure that we are kind of reaching out to those folks to let them know that we're thinking about them if there's a reason why maybe they have a decreased pledge. I feel very lucky. The rector of our parish, he values resource development. He loves fundraising. It's really important to him. So it makes my job really easy because he doesn't mind making an ask of a donor. He's really involved with it. And so I would say the more you can get your rector involved, the better. I would encourage everyone to establish a resource development committee that meets year round. So we have always had an annual giving cabinet at our church. And that was a group that met for about 4 or 5 months in the fall to kind of work on the annual giving campaign. But we realized that we needed a resource development committee to meet year round to discuss all items related to resource development. The 3 areas that Rob mentioned, not just annual giving, but we need to focus on capital giving and planned giving. And beyond that, we talk about things like donor communication, donor cultivation, analyzing our giving data, and just building a culture of generosity in general at our church. So we formed a committee of about 8 people that meet year round. We also have, we still have our annual giving cabinet of about 30 people that meet in the fall, but this resource development committee really kind of looks at all facets of resource development. And as we formed this committee, we talked about, what kind of person do we want to recruit for this? And we quickly realized that this is the role that you want to handpick. It's not necessarily the type of thing you put in the bulletin and ask, if anyone wants to serve in a resource development role. And I think and the reason for that is because it takes a really special fit for this. You want to recruit a good leader, someone who's really committed to your parish, someone who gives generously and gives cheerfully, someone who has experience serving on other boards, they're well connected, and they're not afraid to be invitational, and they're not afraid to make an ask. That's really important. So we wanted to really handpick someone that was good at this. This is the job description that we created for this, and I think having a job description is key. You know, you want to be very specific about what the role is and what you're asking that volunteer to do. So this was just one that we created, but I know that it can be different for each church. I use this committee as a sounding board. I mean, they help make decisions. They offer different perspectives and creative ideas, things that I wouldn't have normally thought of. So the committee has been a really, really great thing for us so far. And we're in our third year of having a resource development committee, and I've been very pleased. The next thing is to educate your staff on the importance of stewardship and resource development. Oftentimes, you know, folks don't know what resource development is. Even sometimes your staff may not know what resource development is. And so you have to explain that to them and why it's important. We can't assume that everyone knows the best practices of resource development. So you have to work with your team on, you know, sharing that with them. I try to meet with our different ministry areas and our staff on a regular basis to help them understand how they can help. That it's not just asking for a pledge or asking for a gift. It's cultivating relationships. It's thanking our volunteers for the time and energy and talent that they give us. It's being invitational. It's sharing the importance of giving with folks. So those are the things that we try to talk about on a regular basis. Each year for our annual giving cabinet, I try to recruit about 4 or 5 different staff members to serve on my annual giving cabinet. We started doing this about 3 years ago, and I found that the staff members that serve on the cabinet are such an asset because they know so much about the church, and they have so many really close relationships with many of our parishioners. So they have been super helpful by serving on the cabinet, but in turn, they also learn a lot about how the campaign runs. I ask staff members if you learn anything about a parishioner that would be helpful for me or a rector or clergy to know, please pass that along as we try to build and cultivate relationships. Any information that they can share with us is great. And then also we work on being invitational and responding to common objections. I think oftentimes our staff can be they might be fearful of inviting someone to do something or asking someone to commit a pledge. So I think often the more we talk about it, the more we practice it, it makes people more comfortable. You just want to help them overcome that fear. And we have even done some role playing where we will set up different scenarios and offer the different objections that you may hear and the response to those. And I think a lot of times people can be uneasy about role playing, but usually in the end, they feel more comfortable and confident about what they're doing when we practice it. This is a given, listening to your parishioners, that's huge. It's common sense, but our donors want to know that we value what they have to say, that we value their opinions. I'm sure y'all have heard the quote, if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. I think this is true though. I think if we're considering something significant at our parish, whether it's a capital campaign or a new program, we want to spend the time having conversations with our donors, specifically our major donors, to help gauge their level of enthusiasm for it. And you can do this in a variety of ways. Good old-fashioned conversation, face-to-face is probably the best. Right now it's probably over the phone or through Zoom, but You can also do this through focus groups, surveys, feasibility studies. There's many ways to gather feedback from your parishioners. As we were considering a capital campaign, before we decided to jump into a feasibility study, we just wanted to make sure that our parish was kind of poised and even ready for that. And so we used a consulting firm called Holy Cow Consulting. They help churches with different surveys based on what you're looking for, what kind of information you're looking to gather. And we were able to learn a lot through that survey. We learned broader information about where our strengths and weaknesses were, and it helped us to understand what our parishioners wanted for the future of our parish. So it really helped direct our priorities as we were setting goals and establishing our budget and planning for the future. So we kind of felt more confident moving forward with a feasibility study, which we've done through Rob. And I'd say, especially now during this pandemic, with things constantly changing, and being that most of us are still probably remote, maybe you're having some in-person worship, but we are still pretty remote at our church. So I think it's important to listen to our parishioners to make sure that we're offering them a meaningful experience, even though we can't be together. So I think the more you can have conversations, the more you can listen. And, right now that's a phone call or a Zoom, but those are really important. Get to know your donors, especially your major donors. We try to be really strategic in cultivating our donors. And when I first started in this role at Christ Church, I printed a list of our major donors, and I kept that list in the drawer of my desk, and I looked at it often so I could remind myself, who those folks were. I think another thing that's really important is to make the time to meet with your donors on a personal level. Again, you can't necessarily do this with everyone. So we've started with our major donors. Last spring, my rector and myself, we made an intentional effort to have a personal lunch or a personal coffee visit with our top 20 donors over the course of the spring, which is about 2 or 3 months. And we did this together, and we invited all of them to lunch. If lunch didn't work, we did coffee, but there was no agenda for these. We called them cultivation visits. There was no agenda for it. It was simply just to build relationships and to get to know our parishioners. And it was time well spent. You can learn a lot about someone in a 1-hour lunch visit. And our rector has a really big office. He's got a dining table in there. So we would eat lunch in his office, and our parish chef would make a nice lunch, and our donors really, really appreciated that. So that's something that we want to continue every spring. We also host one major donor event each year, just to say thank you to that group. Next, I would say, communicating the impact that your church is making is huge. Oftentimes I think churches, we do a really good job of communicating like events and programs and Bible studies and things that fall on the calendar. And sometimes I notice that churches maybe aren't as good as communicating like the impact and the successes. So we can do this in a variety of ways. I try to work really closely with our communications and marketing director to brainstorm on creative ways to, share our impact. We can do that. You can offer church testimonies, success stories, impact numbers, how lives are being changed. And there's many different ways that you can, get this out. We do it through quarterly statements. So every quarter we send our donors a statement, but we send a letter with it that includes what the impact that we've been able to make that quarter. You can do it through an annual report or a mid-year report. That's a great way to celebrate what your church is doing and how many people that you're reaching. Newsletters, website, social media, e-blasts, these are all ways to do that. One thing that our church started doing and we work with our staff to identify KPIs. They're key performance indicators, or that's what we do. And these are things that we can track and measure to see that we are being successful. So each ministry area kind of got together to come up with what their KPIs were going to be for that year. And they would track those monthly or quarterly. And then at the end of the year, we kind of look and see, well, how did we do? So it's a great way to work with your staff on measuring your impact and the successes that you're making. And I think any way too that you can gather stories after maybe an event has concluded or a program or a Bible study has concluded. If you heard from somebody, or if one of your staff members heard from someone who was gushing about their experience or maybe how their life was changed, let's capture that. See if they're willing to share that either through a video or a quote. And finally, thank again. This is obviously a given. I don't think that we can do this enough. And, these hospitals and universities, they've got the staff and the manpower and the money to thank and thank and thank again. I oftentimes know that our resources are a little more limited, but I think the more personal that you can make your thank yous, the better. We every year come up with a thank you plan that we try to follow to make sure that we're thanking people year round, not just during one part of the year. So, during our stewardship campaign, we have when someone makes a pledge within a day or two, we send a little postcard acknowledgement back to them within that day saying, hey, we got your pledge. We are thankful for it. A more formal personal thank you note will be coming in a week or two, but just want to let you know we got that. And then our annual giving cabinet, they write personal handwritten thank you notes to everyone who makes a pledge. We have a thankathon in January and February. And so after the campaign has concluded, we call all of the donors, usually it's 800 plus, just to simply thank them for their commitment to our parish and their gift. And those calls are so well received and people are so grateful for the call. And our staff, we're sending thank you notes for all that folks are doing, not just for their gift, their financial gifts, but their gifts of time and talent and energy. And specifically this year with during this pandemic, I have started writing thank you notes to everyone who has fulfilled their pledge early this year. I don't normally do that. I know I probably should, but especially during these kind of trying times, I want people to know that we are so grateful for their gifts and their commitment, their financial commitment. So that's something that we've been doing. Before I wrap up, I just wanted to share some books that have been really helpful to me over the past few years. When I came from United Way and YMCA, I was a little nervous kind of jumping into church fundraising. And I thought, gosh, this is going to be so different. What am I going to do? But I have found that these books have been really helpful. They're dog-eared. They have Post-it notes in them. But I wanted to share those. And I'm sure many of you probably have these books already. But in case you don't, these are some that have been really, really helpful to me. And this is a brochure, a resource development brochure that Rob and his team at Sinclair Townes have put together to really explain resource development and the importance of it. These are great for like welcome packets or general church packets to help your parishioners understand why resource development is important. So if you want those, Rob has those available. And, really our hope is that the church will become a better steward of its resources by developing best practices and doing these things that will help us, teach stewardship and become a generous community. So hopefully you found that some of this information and these tips can be helpful to you. So we want to thank you. And I know I'm going to see if there's any, I'm going to stop sharing this and then we can look and see if there's any questions. So give me just a second to pull this up. Let's see, it says total dollars giving increasing. What do these numbers look like in dollars? Do you know that, Rob?
I'm not really sure about that one.
Number of people in church is declining, so we would expect decrease, but dollar figures are holding. But our dollar figures holding.
Yeah, I think the trend is that dollars are up and the number of donors are down. But I think that what that may invite people in resource development to do, raise more money and develop a bigger budget for inviting more people to come in and be a part of of our faith community. I know that I was with for years ago the Episcopal Radio TV Foundation, and they were a part of putting together spots whose goal was to bring more people into the church, specifically young marrieds with children, because they found that was the easiest segment to move from not going to church to going to church. So I think that to get more people, we need to spend a lot more money in sending out invitations.
Okay, I see someone asked about, is this advice primarily for large churches? A small church such as ours cannot afford a full-time staff position. We do not have a lot of large donors to cultivate. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have it in your budget to hire a resource development professional, my advice would be form that committee of really committed volunteers who are great leaders, and do that through a strong committee.
I think in some ways it seems to me that there's a special responsibility that that a lot of the SEAP members have, because SEAP members typically are more from the more resourced churches. And so hopefully some of the best practices that are learned through the larger churches can find their way to best practices in the small church, even though you may not have the money at the time to hire a staff person. But I would hopefully you could grow the smaller church to a size where you could add program people and a resource development.
I see that y'all are asking for Rob's email, and that is on the very first slide. So if you, which will be shared, but Rob, if you want to type it in the chat box, you can put your email in there for folks who want the resource development brochure.
It's assuming a lot now. I'm trying my best to see if I can type it in. Oh, okay. There we go. Got it. Typing it now. There you go.
I think the majority of the questions that we're getting are about smaller churches who may not have the resources to hire a dedicated staff person.
And you're right, Lauren, that, it's going to be for these smaller churches, the volunteers have to do the heavy lifting. And all the more important then to get the good, strong leader for this area. And of course, we're trying to grow our churches through raising more money. But if all we were to do is just raise more money, and at the same time we didn't set the table, if we didn't invite people to grow in their relationship with God, and to be able to connect the dots between their giving and moving toward the, being in the image of the gift giver. We need to be able to connect those dots between the giving and the growing towards a divine nature. It is always going to be a both and proposition.
I see a question about how many did you say you have on your resource development committee year round? Right now we have about, I'd say 8 or 9 people. It's a smaller committee, but again, they're all very committed, really strong leaders. I'm probably going to try to keep that committee between 8 and 10 people.
I think the textbook would say you would want a resource development committee to have maybe a couple of people representing the strategic plan, and maybe who were involved in the strategic planning process, so that they can kind of represent and defend what the plan was trying to accomplish. Maybe have a couple of people from the communications area, and then a couple of people, maybe chairs or co-chairs of campaigns, to represent the fundraising arena. But I do think you need to have voices from the, from strategic planning, communications, and fundraising.
Here's a question here. We have a number of parishioners who have pledged for years, but who have either not increased their pledge over the past decade or 2, or who have only increased their pledges nominally. What is a good strategy to help encourage these folks to increase their pledges? I'd say what we do at our parish is we try to identify these folks who, we kind of look at a history of giving over the past maybe 5 to 10 years, and we see where maybe the giving level or the giving has just kind of remained the same. And we kind of come up with a strategy to just talk to those donors and ask them if, ask them if they would consider an increased gift. Oftentimes, I think people just need to be asked, and they're waiting to be asked, and it's up to us to do it. So I think, again, you just kind of overcome that fear and ask them if they would consider, maybe a 5 or 10% increase over the next couple years.
It is safe to assume that most of your givers who are lining the pews are keeping some powder dry. And, they are not giving they're not giving amounts that are in line with their portfolio capabilities. So what I would do is never be afraid to just say, thank you very much for all that you've given. We would ask you to give for this specific area, but for your support, we won't be able to do this, this, this. I love that but for argument. But for your support, we won't be able to do these things. So I think it's just a matter of, getting in front of them and order.
And I think sharing your vision and, what could we do if we were able to if everyone increased their giving by 10 or 20%, imagine the things that we can do, the new programs we could offer. So I think kind of casting that vision for them and sharing all the things that your parish could do if if you were able to increase your giving. I see it says, Lauren, are you changing the timing of your fall campaign due to COVID-19? No, we are not changing anything about the timing. We are forging ahead. Our parish has been really generous during this time, and we have been so completely grateful. And our hope is that their generosity will continue. So, there are certain elements of the annual giving campaign that will change. Obviously, we're not doing it the same way, but we are definitely forging ahead, and we really are hopeful that we will have a successful campaign. And most of the other stewardship professionals that I've talked to at similar sized churches, I've heard the same thing. Nothing's changing about their plans for their fall campaign. The next question is, how do you overcome a culture of secrecy where people don't want donors to be known?
Ooh, yeah. I think it's kind of sad that still in churches, you can bump into a lot of dysfunction over money. And I think money and discussing money is very personal, but in the life of a community, it is not private. We just don't, in community, we don't have that privacy. And I think it's important for leaders to be able to set an environment in a safe zone where numbers can be discussed. And I just think it's an important element for growth. And it's just amazing to me how I can sit on a committee with an Episcopalian in another sector of the nonprofit world, and they're fine with knowing who the givers are and the amounts that they give, who's floating the boat. But when they get into the church setting, they think, whoa, they get all kind of fidgety about sharing numbers in a safe committee like a resource development committee, where you've got to share these, you've got to talk numbers. So I just think we need to set a safe zone where these numbers can be discussed. And I trust that the rectors that I've worked with are, when they get a call in the middle of the night of a pastoral concern, I promise you, none of the rectors that I've worked with first look at the giving file to determine if they're going to go or not. They're just going to get up and they're going to go. And so I just think we need to develop a certain honesty within the right church circles about giving and recognizing people for their generosity. And the theology of that is we give thanks to God for the generosity of the saints among us. And so that, to me, kind of sets it within a safe theological context where we're not talking about ego aggrandizement, but we're talking about giving thanks to God.
I think it's at a point where we're going to wrap up, and we are so appreciative of everyone who's joined in on the webinar. We hope that you found it helpful or found pieces of it that were helpful to you. And Rob and I are happy to talk to you. So if you want to reach out to us and send us an email, we would love to talk further if you would like. But just want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you all so much for being with us, for the great work that you do, and keep it up.
Bye.
Thank you.